Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast, where we take on the mission of unlocking the code of your genetics. This season is all about you, upgrading your health, not just on the surface, but down to the root cause. Join us as your clinicians at the DNA company investigate your DNA and beyond. The intention of this podcast is to enhance your lifestyle by changing what is in your control. This does not substitute the medical advice given by your personal doctor, therapist, and other healthcare professionals.
Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast, where we unlock the secrets of your genetic code to help you live your best life. And this season's all about you, your health, your longevity, and your journey to a better, healthier future. So get ready to revolutionize your health with the knowledge of your unique genetic blueprint. And welcome to a new era of precision medicine. Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Hickey, and this is Bryce Wylde. And we want to remind you that before we get into anything, before you undertake any new practice, you must talk to your doctor and see if the suggestions and the ideas and the conversations that we have here are right for you. Always check with your doctor. I'm really excited about this particular episode because I feel like weekly I am texting Bryce about a supplement that I saw and a thing that I saw. And I want to know, would it work for me? Would it work for my family? And I feel like I want to rip it back and start from the beginning because there's so much noise out there when it comes to supplementation and also fear.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this from the very beginning. If someone is brand new or they're looking to revamp their entire, kit, where do you start? Do you go to a doctor and do you ask for what kind of panel, or do you come to someone
Right.
like you? Where do you begin?
Well, I love that we're beginning there today because I love beginning in the beginning. I love starting where we should start. And the story is rich. And I think most people probably start, at least when they think of the term supplement, at least they think of the gnarly 70s, perhaps they've been around long enough to think of the 70s, and the multivitamin and the beginning of this sort of creation of letter vitamins that might just sort of insert themselves as a stopgap into their daily nutritional routine where they may be failing or falling short on a vitamin or a mineral. The term supplement, in fact, has two sides to this coin. It is that for some people. North of 40 degrees, Cheryl, where you and I both live, we just simply don't get enough sun. We'll talk about that. Vitamin D a bit later in the show. And if you're not getting enough sun and your body's not converting that through the skin into vitamin D, you simply need to supplement your diet, or if you're not getting enough vitamin D rich food. So there is that concept, enough of an ingredient to sort of get into your system because you can't otherwise get it from diet, or you can't get it from your environment. Your body can't convert it. So you supplement your diet. But really, since the, let's say, even late 90s, the term itself has this other side to the coin. There's this very now rich history of therapeutic intervention using natural ingredients in order to optimize your overall health. And that is to say, in many instances, we're not looking to use an ingredient or a supplement, again, as the term has been coined, in order to solve a gap in the diet. We're using it for therapeutic intervention, and often not always as a drug replacement, but
Right.
very much in context of what we do at the DNA company in order to wash over your genes, because you can't change or alter your genetic code. I mean, there's
Right.
CRISPR, but that's not what we're talking about. You can't change your DNA, but you can manage your genetic expression using botanicals, therapeutics such as amino acids, nutraceuticals, herbs. We're talking about in many cases things that derive from nature, but they're not in your diet. So you're not looking to get enough out of a pill to satisfy what might be lacking in your diet. You're looking to modify genetic expression in your advantage. And Cheryl, here's the deal: change the day you die. That's what
Okay.
we're about.
Which I love. But can we go back to, you mentioned DNA 360. How can that help in trying to decide what supplements, what vitamins might be good for me?
Sure. So what we're looking at are these what are affectionately referred to as SNPs. Some people call them mutations. They're not mutations. We just all have variations of the code called genetics or DNA within each of us. We're just all unique, and there's no such thing as bad code and good code. It's literally just what letters do you have within this alphabet of A, G, C, and T. That's the DNA alphabet, A, G, C, T. So you could have one letter switch out, and that's your SNP, or single nucleotide polymorphism. And that's the first and only time I'll say that in this
Oh,
podcast. So
okay.
that means variation on letter sequence. So if your A is switched out for a G and my C is switched out for a T, then we just have differences in our genetic expression. Now, if that's the case and yours describes to your body an optimal way to carry vitamin D from the sun's rays and circulate that through your
Which
body,
mine does not, which I
okay,
learned through my profile.
okay. And then mine does, then I might not have to be as concerned about supplementing to avoid that gap in my diet or sun exposure. I might not be able to or need to take extra vitamin D, whereas you do. And that would ultimately reflect, and you would have this checked with your family doctor on an annual physical, or maybe even more frequently. By the way, I'll throw it out there for listeners. 25-OHD, which is a serum blood test anyone can get from their family doctor. And there are normal values, there are optimal values, and then there are suboptimal values and very abnormal values. And when those values are abnormal, you're not carrying enough vitamin D, it's responsible for not a few, not dozens, but hundreds of different biochemical cascades in the body, ranging from immune function to brain function to bone health to cardiovascular health. The list is very long. So running around
Mhm.
with low vitamin D, just as one example of many, that your DNA encodes for, again, your aptitude, your ability to do well from sun exposure or not. That defines, what you need to otherwise do in terms of supplementation.
So stick around to the end of the podcast and we'll give you a code if you're interested in starting there with the DNA 360. But okay, so say you do the test and you know where I call it the potholes are in the road. That's how I equate it for myself. Next, I go to my doctor or someone like yourself, a functional medicine doctor, and I say, I need this test. What test do I need to see where you mentioned vitamin D, but everything else, my magnesium, all my minerals, like what's that test?
No, it's a great question. So DNA is interesting because it's really a one and done test. And so DNA never changes.
Right.
That is the information, the code. It is your playbook. It's your instruction manual to describe how well you do in life, apropos your environment, how well you detoxify, how well your hormones move through your body, and certainly, as we're talking about today, how well you deal and or use micronutrients such as vitamins and minerals and others, amino acids, etc., and whether your need is there to supplement. So let's just assume your need is there to supplement. What tests do you run functionally? Okay, because that's a snapshot of now. DNA doesn't change, DNA informs. Then it's what do you do to actually test yourself? I call this bookending. So we could basically bookend your potholes. Okay, we can bookend
Bookend
because
your potholes,
bookend your
people.
potholes.
That's what everyone needs to know. You just need to know you need to bookend your potholes. So how do we do that?
Well, by testing. And by testing, often what we're looking at, you can do blood, urine, hair tissue, depending on what you're looking for. For example, I mentioned hair. I like hair for certain minerals because your hair deposits a protein sequence and it deposits throughout that, week, month, and months, depending on how long you're growing your hair, minerals. And if the body has an excess, it'll show you. It's kind of like the bark in a tree. You cut a tree and you'll see through the wood in the tree these rings. Your hair is similar. So over time, it deposits minerals in excess, or it will show depletion or
What's
deficiency.
that
So,
test called?
hair tissue mineral analysis.
Okay.
So HTMA. And then certain times you can look at blood. Like if your doctor's looking for iron deficiency or iron excess. By the way,
Right.
iron excess is one of the worst things you can have. It causes something called a Fenton reaction, very high oxidative stress in areas. A lot of people carry genetic predisposition, certainly guys of too high of an iron that can cause non-fatty liver disorders and so forth. So a lot of different ways in which you can look for minerals, sometimes having too much. In fact, most of the time having too much of a good thing is not a good thing. So different ways to look at things, but bookending your potholes is really defining where your DNA sits to warrant or at least action upon what you need to test for in the beginning. And then
Mhm.
that intervention, that's really the topic of discussion. Again, today is supplementation. So that intervention, if it's supplementation, takes its course. Maybe it's months or years, and then bookending is at the end of that year to test on whether or not you're doing the right thing. Do you need to continue with that supplement? What are those levels? And that would be something you would revisit on a regular basis to tweak and to modify supplementation dosages. Really, that's a huge crux of how functional medicine works, right there in a nutshell.
So do you recommend someone going and buying their own supplements? I don't like the word willy-nilly. Who started that? It's willy-nilly is
I
not
don't
even
know.
a thing.
Willie
But
Nelson, I don't know.
Willie Nelson. But you see something and you're like, "Oh, I think I need that. Oh, I need turmeric. Oh, I'm going to go buy that." Do you advise people to just be going on an Amazon, on another source, wherever it is, buying supplements and just taking them without consulting? Or
I think that is absolutely still one component of how we would describe the supplement industry as still buyer beware. It's cleaned itself up quite a bit. It's gotten a little more evidence based. In fact, it took this direction for a while throughout the early 2000s where, it was so much focused toward, I suppose, becoming pharmaceutical. In fact, that's where the term nutraceutical is derived, right? An ingredient that
yeah.
acted similar to a pharmaceutical extracted from nature having a very specific function. Now it's almost come full circle in functional ingredients, whole ingredients, protein powders and collagens and functional greens have kind of made a full comeback because and I'll come full circle to your question, but supplements in general now have more of this meaning of adding beyond your diet, not just supplementing a gap in your diet. And
Mm,
so to your question, whether people should willy nilly go out and purchase sort of anything that's new and GLP-1s. Here's a topic of very it's become incredibly hot these days. GLP-1s are agonists or type of drug that actually help very rapid weight loss. Originally designed for diabetics, but like Ozempic is a brand, for example, of GLP-1s. Berberine, which is an ingredient within the realm of supplementation or natural medicine, has recently been dubbed nature's GLP-1. People that are looking to lose weight and manage their blood sugar, should they just run out and go and buy berberine? Absolutely not. So we're huge advocates of the DNA company to first understand, do you? I mean, first of all, anyone listening today, as you just alluded to in the top, if you've got, if you've got issues, health issues, and you have a family physician, you should never be changing anything or doing anything without speaking to that primary healthcare provider.
mhm.
Second to that, if you suspect that maybe you just want to get better blood sugar and or drop some weight, you still shouldn't be running out and buying berberine because you see it, in Google ads or you heard about it on the latest podcast. Again, what we look at the DNA company are your predispositions genetically to whether or not you've got sugar disruption or imbalances and or you've got predispositions to weight gain or fat tissue percentage discrepancies, we like to refer to it, because weight on the scale, let's abolish BMI. BMI is like how much you weigh and how high you are, tall you are, and therefore you're overweight. Let's talk about this in context of muscle and fat tissue composition. So if that's discrepant, there's significant genetic reasons for that. In fact, most of them, by the way, start in the head. That is to say, the brain, the executive function, mood, and behavior is what drives so much of our eating habits in North America. It's not all to blame big food, but it's to
Yes.
consider and appreciate how we're all unique and different from mood, brain chemistry through to metabolism. So that's a long-winded way of answering the question: should we all just run out and buy the latest, greatest? It stems from this, exactly as I said earlier, this whole notion that supplement was a multi, and then all you had to do is go and choose the best multi to satisfy the gaps in your diet. It's just not what a supplement really has come to be. Now we're looking at way above it to get food right. That's where you want to start. Eat your berries, eat a rainbow of fruits and vegetables every single day. But what more can you do to change the day you die? What additional ingredients can you use? And the
Yeah.
only way to know is to first test your genetics to understand where you want to even focus your
Yeah.
time, energy, and by the way, financial ability to support what needs to be modified.
That's right. And there's a lot of people talking about, be very careful about doctors or people who are pushing supplements. I mean, there are some really wonderful doctors that you and I follow that have bothered to take the time to create really wonderful supplements and with a lot of research and a lot of care.
Yeah,
And I think, doing your research and really understanding ethically where that came from, understanding the backstory is really, really important. Whether
absolutely.
that's a brand that you see in the store or a brand that you see online. I think the bottom line is there, do your homework. Just because it's a doctor and they're selling something doesn't mean that they're not selling something good. Maybe they've done a whole lot of work that's really wonderful. So just take the time
No,
to
you make an
understand it.
excellent point. And we'll have them on our show. Look forward to this in the future, folks. Dr. Oz, Dr. Hyman, they'll both join us. We'll have them on the show.
Yeah.
They both represent, they'll be honest and open about that and transparent. iHerb. iHerb is a great online portal for some of the best in class. Not everything, of course. There's no
Yeah.
portal that's perfect for everything, but the two of them separately and even together can speak to quality, transparency, traceability, safety, efficacy. That's
Yeah.
what really the world of supplements needs more advocates that come from. By the way, and here's what most people think: Dr. Oz is a TV doctor only, and somehow, but he's the most highly regarded cardiothoracic, most papered cardiothoracic surgeon in North
Hmm.
America, maybe the planet. I can't say that for sure, but one of the most. He's got over 200 patents on on heart stents and implants. It's just amazing. So he's not a TV doctor. He's way more than that. And now he's brought to the world a plethora of information around evidence-based supplementation. So he's actually working with iHerb along with
Amazing.
Dr. Hyman. Yeah, yeah, and they're doing
Yeah.
some really good work.
And I think that's the thing, get to know your source, and make that decision for yourself, whatever feels right. But I want to get into some basics because I think I want to fire some issues at you and ask you about some supplements. So get a pen and pad of paper, write these down, and again, take them to your doctor, take them to your functional medicine doctor, and ask the questions. Start the conversations. Let's start with sleep. I want to talk about the importance of, getting quality sleep, not the kind of sleep that you wake up and throughout the night, multiple wake ups. Let's talk about good supplementation that you like. What's the grade A?
Yeah. So to understand supplementation, you first have to understand your predisposition. The predisposition is what areas within your sleep architecture are you having problems? And let's define quickly sleep architecture. So it's not the time you hit the pillow and the time you wake up. And I think I had some dreams. This is not about the hours exclusively that you clock on the pillow, which most of us strive for 8. This is about how you go from step 1 or phase 1 into 2, 3, 4, bounce up into REM, which is actually a lot lighter sleep phase than most people realize. They think when they go into REM, which is we call rapid eye movement. It's the acronym. When your eyes are closed at that stage of sleep, your eyes are bouncing back and forth so fast. It's very interesting to see, actually. And EEGs will develop signatures that actually show where you are in any given stage of sleep. So this is like endless amounts of research to back what I'm saying, of course. But when you're in this, you go through these brain waves, sort of delta, and then during the day. Right now we're in gamma, right? Alpha is a little more meditative. Then you go into delta, and different wavelengths, but deeper into sleep. Stage 3 and 4 is restorative. One interesting thing we've learned about the brain is it doesn't have a lymphatic system like the rest of our body. It's got what's called glymph or glial cells, which are non-thinking cells that their responsibility is to detoxify. One thing at the DNA company that we very much appreciate is everyone has differing abilities to detoxify. And
That's
this is
right.
not just from ethereal industrial pollutants, that we hear about more, or dioxins and furans and hormones and pharmaceuticals in the water and heavy metals. We're talking about just living and breathing. You're making toxins that you have to expel. Okay. The only time you do that efficiently, and certainly from the brain, is at night. And that only happens effectively at night when, by the way, you get sleep hygiene, optimized, which is a cool, dark room. You're able to get into that deep sleep. Okay, so lymphatics aside, once that architecture has become optimized, and the average person needs to go through about 4 or 5 of those phases a night, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up into REM. And they sort of have different ways in which they express throughout the night. But that takes about the average person 90 minutes to get through each phase. You do the quick back of the napkin cowboy math. This equates to that 7 to 8 hours we keep hearing
Yeah.
about. So now the question becomes full circle: supplements that actually help at different stages of that architecture. Some people have an ability to fall asleep quickly. So that's a little more of the, well, what hypnotics or anxiolytics, we'll talk about some. If they have a problem waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to fall back asleep, we call these hamster wheel
Okay, then
individuals.
go back. Let's say you're the person who can't fall asleep. What's the
Sure. So,
supplement?
well, I like, there's valerian, there are the
Valerian.
adaptogens. Yeah,
Yep.
valerian or anything. So any of the herbs, and we'll name some others. Melissa officinalis. I love Melissa.
I don't know
Ashwagandha is a
Melissa.
good one.
I don't know
Melissa.
Melissa.
Oh,
Okay.
so these are herbs in which to entice or induce a state of relaxation. So most
Okay.
of us are wound up, and we typically are sympathetic dominant. So fight or flight. Parasympathetic, the opposite of that, is the nervous system that allows for rest and digest. Some of us are just better able, certainly as it's time for bed, to go from sympathetic into parasympathetic and allow the body to fall asleep.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're wound up and we can't get relaxed. So that's when you want to go for those things that help you relax. And I like some of those that I just mentioned. Now,
What
if
about
it wake,
magnesium complex?
oh, thank you. I love
That one
magnesium.
is my favorite. I'm taking a complex in the last, I don't know, 6 months, and I have found not only is my sleep better, but my reoccurrence of any anxiety, like I haven't felt this good in a million years. And that's I attribute it to my magnesium.
Yep. Well, magnesium, particularly threonate, which is amazing for the brain, and bisglycinate helps to relax, the muscles. That's a musculoskeletal. The brain loves threonate. It's allowed by the blood brain barrier, and it's easily taken into the brain. Helps, by the way, a gene called brain derived neurotrophic factor, which is all about neuroplasticity. So does vitamin D already, but we talked about. But vitamin D and magnesium threonate help for neuroplasticity. This whole age old notion that after, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, early school years, that's it. We don't learn anymore. Not true. Our brains are neuroplastic. Their ability
Yeah.
to make new nerve connections and disconnect, by the way, is just as important. Continues throughout life as long as you're taking care of your brain, and sleep's a huge pivotal way to do that. By the way, and also forgetting, not just remembering things, forgetting things. That's all neuroplasticity.
Learning
And
to
then
let things go. Yeah.
yeah, and then neurogenesis, new nerve cell formation, particularly in the hippocampus, the center for memory and
Mhm.
learning, happens as long again as you take care of your brain. And there's ways in which, and one of the best ways is that deep, restful sleep. And so, if you have premature waking, or we call this advanced phase sleep disorder, you have a premature waking, and this happens, in senility. As we age, it naturally happens. This is why, like, old people get up with the roosters. Yes, that happens, but it happens because of accelerated aging. It doesn't have to happen. It just tends to happen. So
Yeah.
things to keep deep sleep going relates back to the serotonin melatonin pathway. We tend to get low or decrease in our production from our pineal gland and melatonin. So all these things are devisable, testable through DNA. How well do you get into deep sleep? Are you the hamster wheel, more prone to anxious thought processes within the mood, behavior, and executive function
Yeah.
panel? Do you detoxify effectively? I mentioned lymphatics. How do we support that if that's ultimately what's disturbing your sleep? From a behavioral perspective, I mean, there's just some folks that are prone to wake up and be hungry and have a midnight snack, and these are all genetic predispositions. So anyways, if you have that sort of mid latent issue in the middle of the night, getting up and not being able to fall back asleep, I would encourage you to be thinking about things like melatonin, even tryptophan, which, by the way,
Is in turkey. Whenever
yep,
you have a turkey dinner,
yeah,
right?
that's true. No, it is true. And even pumpkin seeds are very high in tryptophan. Really interesting research around pumpkin seed powder extract. Basically, is a wonderful tryptophan source, but that, along with the B complex and how our body's methylation, is a huge other dump to this conversation. It's a can of worms to open that one
We'll
up.
get
But
to that one.
methylation,
That's a
Our
whole day.
ability to methylate, it's a whole other podcast, to be honest, but our
Which
ability.
really would be interesting because of that showed on mine, I'm not a great methylator. I'm great at
Yep.
a lot of things, but
Yep.
apparently I'm not very good at that. So we'll dive into that because I think that's a really
Well,
important one.
Well, here's a teaser. I think at some near future episode, what we're going to do is actually open up your findings
We
and
are.
your results on the genetic
Mhm.
side. And you'll reveal why you are Cheryl Hickey, what makes you
Yeah.
tick, and how your hormones work. And methylation is a big deal. Methylation, people talk about it all the time like it's a hot topic and it's sort of a fancy sort of synonymous way of saying how do I deal with inflammation, but it's so much more to that. In fact, it's actually how our genes work. How our genes are turned on and off is through this process of methylation.
Yeah.
How cancer is allowed to sort of propagate in the body has a huge amount to do with methylation. How a lot of our mood behavior, psychiatric disorders evolve or don't. Autoimmunity
That was a
evolves or
beautiful
doesn't.
teaser for methylation, but we can't go there right now. We gotta
No, we're
go
not. You're
back to
right.
these
Reel me
supplements,
back.
but we're gonna
Yes.
come back to that. I love that. I wanna go to anxiety because I feel like it is something that so many in our society are struggling with and working with. Sometimes I call it my superpower because there's times when it works for me and there's times when it doesn't. And I think that we're seeing more and more young people struggling with anxiety. And again, I push and say, as we talk about these supplements and these ideas, always talk to your doctor. So
Sure.
let's talk about the importance that magnesium can play for those who are struggling or working with anxiety. GABA and L-theanine. These are
Yeah.
three that are really incredible. Talk a little bit about why they're incredible.
Well, beautiful trifecta there, and again, as we're not endorsing you run out and just try any old supplement. Perfect example as well, by the way, is you often can't eat yourself to therapeutic ranges of theanine. It's found in green tea. We'll talk about how it works, but you'd have to really consume the equivalent of about 13 or so, 15 cups, most science suggests, of green tea of the highest quality before getting a therapeutic dose of theanine. You just wouldn't do that. Same with GABA. I mean, this is found in our diet, gamma aminobutyric acid, but out of context of the food we eat, it's an amino acid. So out of protein, and you take this exclusively, typically on an empty stomach, it will induce a state of relaxation. It's a neurotransmitter. And so we study these at the DNA company. The neurotransmitters are the genes that control the production, the amount of these neurotransmitters that each of us are unique to producing, as well as the uncoupling or metabolization. How long do they get to stay around, sort of soaking in the brain and doing what they typically do? So
Mhm.
it's a beautiful trifecta: magnesium, GABA, and theanine. But to first understand whether or not they're indicated for the individuals to know their DNA, but to study DNA is to determine whether or not somebody is more predisposed to go back to that sympathetic dominant state or the ability to bounce back into parasympathetic state. So, this is the nervous system.
Yeah.
We're wired this way as a human species to be more predominantly riding high on sympathetic state. Again, fight or flight. And that's because it's evolutionarily sustainable. Like the people that were so chill to
Yeah.
hang out, sort of at the edge of their cave, not worry about what was lurking around in the night, and
I
just
was
kind of
not
walk.
her. I was
Yeah,
not her at the
most
I
of us
was not
weren't.
the chill one in the cave. I
Yeah,
don't think.
no,
Oh,
the ones that survived. There were some of them, but they just didn't survive. They didn't have babies. The ones that had
uh,
babies, they're the ones that
we were
rode
the
high. And most,
warriors. We were the
yeah, the
wanderers,
warriors, the anxious,
right?
right? And then
Yeah.
we are their progeny, right? So many tens of thousands of years later, and we still,
Yeah.
again, survivalistic. It's becoming less needed, right, to be in that zone. Most of us, this fight or flight ensues from being, maybe in close proximity to too many people. For others, it's whatever the boss is going to, have a conversation with you about that day, or your teacher. And yet others, it's
Or on
social.
digital for way too long. I am hearing about more and more young people and people my age, but more and more young people who are maybe don't have great digital habits, and it's causing incredible amounts of anxiety, and they can't figure out why.
Right.
It's just the scrolling and the blue light and everything in their eyes, and it's just a mess.
Well,
So
that's
it's
another
a real
trigger
problem.
you just described. I mean, blue light emits in order to trigger, the serotonergic, which, by the way, is a neuroexcitatory hormone. There's neuroinhibitory, and GABA is one of them. Theanine actually helps to support that pathway, GABA. And then there's the neuroexcitatory. So there's adrenaline,
And blue
noradrenaline.
light
So
pushes that?
yeah, blue light actually signals the serotonergic pathway, and that's why at night, you see a lot of these biohackers wearing, yellow and orange to block the blue light, so as to allow the melatonergic pathway to take over, to prepare you for sleep. So that's the whole notion there in a nutshell. But again, anxiety is the nervous system's way of dealing with impending doom. It's just that it's an executive dysfunction or maladaptation in today's world, where this fear-based, whether it's social or whatever might be your trigger, won't kill you. The same chemistry is evoked. So in order to help, it's really like an elastic band. How can we train the system in order to snap back from a sympathetic state, which is not bad? It's remaining in it, which is
Okay, so
damaging.
then would something as simple, I know it's not a supplement, but blue light glasses, especially for young people, would that be something that you would say you should be using when you're on the computer or you're on your phone?
Well, I think it's one of those things that people can try easily in combination with other things. I think first,
Okay.
and again, the empowerment here, and we just reiterate this whole notion of you can't change your genes. Your
Yep.
DNA is what it is, locked in. Mom and dad have dealt you cards. Those are your cards. How you play them in this game of life determines the quality of life you will have. So, knowing what those cards are those cards, in this instance, the question becomes, are those cards you're dealt, are they challenged for serotonergic production, inability to sleep properly, and high anxiety? If so, then maybe think about spending the money on some really high quality blue blockers. Consider supplementing with magnesium, GABA, and theanine.
Okay.
Theanine is, I am so hot about this amino acid. If anyone is out there listening and they're anxious and they're like, I don't have, $500 budget to spend on DNA testing, nor the inclination, which I still encourage you consider because it's more informing than anything you've ever done. But if they don't have that and they just want to try something very safely, even if they're taking most medications, always talk to your doctor first. But theanine is so benign, doesn't really interact with anything, and it's going to increase alpha wave. Alpha wave is that brain state, if you will, or brain EEG signature, right? That is Zen like meditative. So it is focus, alertness, concentration, but without sedation. You're not sedated, right? Like, the benzodiazepines, people with anxiety know about this class of medications. The first one thrown at them by their family doctor. It's also the most addictive, and causes the most, some of the most problems when it comes to psychiatric, intervention on the planet. But benzos aside, theanine is a natural calmer, right? It can induce alpha wave. It can allow the brain to come from sympathetic to parasympathetic. By the way, if you're into lifestyle modifications, you would combine or pair. We call this stacking, right? You can
Mm,
stack with supplements. We can
yeah.
talk. This is a
Always
great
good.
stack. Magnesium, GABA, theanine is a wonderful
Yep.
stack, but you can also stack with lifestyle. So if you were to take theanine, and my recommendation, anyone try 200 or 300 milligrams. By the way, hundreds of studies on sun theanine, right? So there's branded ingredients out there, and then there's
'Cause there's a
generic.
big difference between you see the sun-theanine and L-theanine out there.
Right. And the difference is some are backed by science and others are just sort of, knockoffs. And maybe they're as good, but I tend to trust the science. So something is evidence-based. They fit that whole criteria of safety, science, efficacy, transparency, purity, potency, all of that. But 200 milligrams twice daily. This has been studied in hundreds of human clinical trials, even for ADHD, 5 trials done on children. By improving their sleep and their anxiety, their ADHD improves, right? So really amazing stuff come out of the research around theanine. But if you pair that, and that was my thought, you pair that with a lifestyle of breath work. We've spoken about this before, you and I, on Instagram lives and so forth.
Yeah, the
But just a
importance of breath,
box
right?
breath, right? If you were to take this 20 minutes or so before a box breath, which is 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold for 4, 4 in, hold for 4. It's in the shape of a box. You can imagine going
The
that.
number of times I've done box breathing on an airplane and people are like, "Is
Right.
that girl okay?" But I will say I've done
Works.
box breathing. I've been taking L-theanine for years, and that's something that I would say even in some of the most stressful times, like in the last year and a half, where there were a lot of big changes professionally, and then the losing of a loved one. Um, for me, that was a really, really big help. It really was. The box breath and the suntheanine was really big. But I also want to make sure that we do say this, and you covered this before, but for anyone who is on medication from their doctor, if that's working for you and you're finding relief, then you also need to do what you need to do. But also maybe
Absolutely.
taking this information and going to your doctor and saying, okay, what about this? What about this? What do you think of this? It's a great conversation starter.
I'd like to double down on that thought because it's an excellent reminder, but I'd like to double down on it from an angle most wouldn't necessarily consider. And it's not
Okay.
the switch out. We're not in natural medicine or functional medicine to constantly give advice as to here's what you
That's
replace,
right.
conventional drugs with, because sometimes they're absolutely well indicated and or the conditions well diagnosed and the drugs well matched. But here's the thought,
Right.
and it's, this is getting better and better studied, is in many instances a supplement. Once again, this is sort of that other half of the coin, right? A supplement is not to, solve a gap in that individual's diet, like they're deficient in theanine. That's almost an impossibility. But it's to complement, in many cases, a drug. It is to add on, and then also in many cases to offset the side effects of the drug. So I'll give you a quick example. We see all over the TV these days. Certain celebrities are even endorsing the use of ubiquinol or coenzyme Q10. If you're taking a statin drug, okay, which is to lower cholesterol, then it's not you maybe think about it or you should. You absolutely need to be taking coenzyme Q10 with that drug. The drug causes a deficiency in ubiquinol or coenzyme Q10. So the point I'm making is in this instance, a diet hasn't caused lowered amounts of CoQ10. The drug has caused a deficiency in CoQ10. Now you need to offset that deficiency, not stop the drug, because in many instances, a statin
Very
drug or
important.
cholesterol
Yes.
lowering agent is amazing for you if
Mhm.
when it's well diagnosed. And it doesn't. It isn't always. I'm saying in many cases it is. Now you got to take the supplement, coenzyme
Yeah.
Q10.
It's having the conversation. And again, this is what this podcast is all about, grabbing these nuggets of information, talking to someone like Bryce, talking to your family doctor, and asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. This is your health, this is your roadmap, and that's really what matters. And I think, speaking of roadmap, in my family, there is a lot of autoimmune, and I think there's a lot of people out there who have autoimmune in their families. Talk a little bit about the importance of supplementation for those who either have family members who have autoimmune or they themselves have autoimmune. Because it can be very scary because you're like, what's going to trigger? What will that? Can it? What do we do? I think it's a big scary place for a lot of people.
It is. Well, here's what might shock you and the listeners. Autoimmunity is a spectrum disorder, a multitude of different types of autoimmunity, but most of which are themselves spectrums. That is to say, most of us are predisposed to some type of autoimmunity or another. This ranges from multiple sclerosis through Sjogren's, through rheumatoid arthritis. There's many conditions for which the body has made a mistake and it started to attack its own tissue. And this mistake, there's many theories around, depending on the disease at hand, how this starts. A lot of theories around viral onsets, a lot of theories around environmental and toxic overload. But I'll tell you, genetic predisposition is number one. And most of us have it to some form or another to certain autoimmunity. Predisposition being there, I'll give you an example. Great studies are now, you're familiar with this.
Mhm.
Vitamin D deficiency, riding that for long periods of time, if you are predisposed to multiple sclerosis, is one way, not the only way, of course, one way that you're more likely to express the condition. So, riding vitamin D deficiency for a long period of time to those predisposed genetically to MS is going to make that chance of developing MS much higher, much greater.
Which
And that's
again
just
is
one,
the reason, one of the reasons to know your numbers. We say that so
right?
many times. Know your numbers. when you
Yeah.
have your physical, go ask for that test that we talked about earlier. Sorry to interject.
And
Yeah.
no, and I think that no, you make always these incredible points. And I just sort of underscore, and you and I both agree on this as well, that your health is an investment, never an
Mhm.
expense. And I don't just mean monetary, I mean the time it takes to develop an account. Just closing your eyes for 5 minutes and listening to your body is one great way to start. What's
Yeah.
going on with me right now? I'm in more pain than I was yesterday. Why am I not as energetic? Am I waking up too early
I
in the
don't
middle of
think
the
we
night?
do
Whatever
that
it
as
is,
a
we
society
don't.
anymore.
We
We
push
don't
forward.
because we wake up, we get to our phone immediately. We don't think about anything. We down the coffee, down the tea, out the door we go.
Yep.
But wow, I don't know why that hit me so much, but really closing your eyes and saying to yourself, what's happening in my body? It
We should
sounds so
take account
simple
every
though.
day. Right. Part of
Wow.
that, part of the notion that surrounds meditation and, sort of to take
Which
account
I
of
love so much.
breath, right, and heart, focusing in on the heart. It's called a heart lock-in. This is the work of heart math and Dr. Roland McCready. Amazing stuff. So heart lock-in is that just a momentary lapse of acknowledgement of where you are, and also locking into your
Mhm.
heart rate variability to improve, like 5 or 10 minutes to improve the rest of your day. It's a small investment that most of us ignore, that we think we don't have, but the translation or return on investment is everything. I can't. So people hear me throw around these catchy phrase terms all the time. Change the day you die. In fact, the DNA company, we're currently writing a book titled Change the Day You Die. We don't think we know and substantiate this evidence based in any instance. We're always evidence based. We know that knowing your DNA, okay, I don't care what aspect, detox, hormones, executive function, letter vitamins, knowing your DNA, having your playbook, knowing what to invest your finances, your time, your energy, your focus on, it will, to some capacity, for some people, many, many months, and others, many years, it will change the day you die with this information. And even just starting, like you said, in that moment, 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the beginning of your day to take account for what's happening to your body and how you're feeling, that will change your day. This whole notion around push forward, push through, wait until symptoms become significant problems. That's crazy. You have to, your health is the best investment you can make from all angles,
Yeah.
always.
And
But
having
when it,
a playbook is crucial. We have it for a car, you have it for your fridge, you have it for your microwave, you have a manual for everything in your house.
right.
Of course there's something for you. And that's why I'm a part of this entire group. This is what makes me so excited.
No, I love it. So,
Yeah.
and the basic premise, back to autoimmunity real quick, because this is very important to get
Mhm.
out. The basic premise of autoimmunity is this mistake the body's made. And I think I want to empower folks to understand that whereas there's most often no cure for most autoimmune conditions, it's a human threshold phenomenon. Most conditions are, and most are not needle in a haystack scenarios where, oh, we find that one thing and this one thing applies to everyone with that condition. It's N of one, you. It is your predispositions matched with your environment, your diet, your lifestyle, etc. So once you understand you, just know this: with an autoimmunity, whether it's a combination of drugs, diet, lifestyle, supplementation, you can get to a point where your body no longer expresses those symptoms. That's true for all forms of autoimmunity, depending to some degree at what stage they are in that autoimmune journey, right? So if it's some instances they are so far into the state, it's hard to come back. But you can get to a point where you're asymptomatic. Does that mean it's cured? No, because you always have that predisposition. So threshold, you've gone beyond your threshold. Now you're symptomatic, but you
But
can
your
come
expression
under.
of symptoms,
Is
that's what we
exactly
want to work towards.
correct. So, like, everyone knows that when you've been sick with a cold or a flu, it's so unlikely that the following week or 2 weeks or even month you're going to get sick again, because your immunity is on high alert. It's been brought up. That's true for even COVID recently. No one got COVID back to back. There is such a thing as chronic or long COVID, but nonetheless, you don't get sick twice in a row. And that's because your immune system's on high alert. There's two parts to the immune system: there's innate and there's learned. We're born with innate. Okay. Then we have to learn by exposure how to deal with the rest of the infections in the world. But the innate's there. These are what we call natural killer cells born onto us from, some of it comes to us through our mother's milk. Some of it comes to us through the microbiome, through our, birthing experience, et cetera, et cetera. Some of us are more predisposed to immune discrepancies because of the lack of being breastfed or having natural vaginal birth. So nonetheless, this immune system is innate and learned. When we learn and we have exposure to a virus, okay, let's call it the flu of 2023. Some of us got it, COVID or otherwise, doesn't matter. Flu of 2023. You get that. You become symptomatic. Some of us are hard and fast, fever's high. We're in bed for a day. We sweat it out. Boom, back to work in 48 hours. That's healthy. The epitome of health is not whether you get sick. It's simply how managed or how well you manage that disease so that you expedite it and you're quickly without subsequent repercussions, how quickly you manage that disease. People that linger for weeks and months later, then with chronicities later, that's not healthy. So, and the big but is you form memory cells and then you learn to never get that exact same flu again. Your body will never have it. It mutates, right? The flu changes so you can get the mutated form, but you'll never get that 2023 flu again. And so
Right.
that's learned immunity. Now, when the body makes a mistake, I'll just give a very simple example. We talk about gluten-free, for example, a lot of times with autoimmunity because gluten has this uncanny ability to trigger a lot of our immune systems. It's a protein matrix that's found within barley, rye, oats, spelt, and wheat. And we haven't had that in our historical evolution nutrition for very long. So 30,000 years of this exposure, and it's kind of still confusing. But here's the deal. Anyone with autoimmune thyroiditis, Hashimoto's Graves' disease, the gluten molecule in your pasta, your bread, your cakes, your cookies looks exactly only one molecule off to your thyroid. So now, if this is translocating from your gut into general circulation, and your immune system sees that and goes, you know what, I don't know, and it attacks it, just to be safe, it starts to develop memory cells around that structure. And then it looks at your thyroid next day or week and it goes, wait a second, I think I just saw that somewhere. You know what? Put a stamp on that for attack as well. Line up the natural killer cells, bring in the troops, let's kill this off. So now you've got autoimmune thyroiditis. Now your immune system's attacking your own tissue, but it's not because of anything much more than predisposition and gluten in your diet. Believe it or
Wow.
not. Anyway, so that
I,
aside, once your body has made a mistake, and this is really my end point, it does not forget, or at least not very easily. So when you've made a mistake to start to attack your own tissues, no matter what theory behind it is, viral or environment or otherwise, imagine if you forgot what that 2023 flu looked like. You'd be sick all the time with
yeah.
everything that hit you. So all you would ever be is sick and you would die prematurely. So our bodies don't like to forget. The phenomenon behind autoimmunity is a mistake led by a healthier, in some cases, too healthy of an immune system that just wants to keep going at it. It remembers, but it's made a mistake. So what the point is here is that genetics incorporated into diet, lifestyle, functional medicine, maybe even some drugs, the focus becomes how do we tone down or immunomodulate the individual? How do we
Yep.
balance the individual so as to your point, you just said it, bring them out of symptomatology to live a long, healthy life?
I love that. My gosh, it's so much. Listen, I wanted to get into hormone balance, but I feel like I don't know that we have time for that. I think we're going to have to come back to all of it. I
We're
feel
going
like
to talk.
every
We're going to
episode
talk about your
we're gonna
hormones. Yeah, every episode's going to bleed into so much more,
we're
Cheryl.
gonna
And you're so
every
kind to
episode's
talk
like
to.
a we need a part two. We're gonna do a part two on supplements because there's so much. There just
There's
is.
so much. Well, and it's going to come into everything we talk about. Supplements, is one way that, we have in today's day and age society, we've technologically been allowed or able to extrapolate the power of nature and put it into an easy to take capsule or pill or tablet,
Yep.
right? And in most cases, natural ingredients don't have a single mechanism of action. Furthermore, they're not patentable. So they will always remain cheaper in general than drugs. And they'll typically do more things for you than a single drug or medication. And genetics, by the way, not only can inform you as to what those things are that you should do or take, but now we're running at the DNA company pharmacogenetics. We now can
Mm,
inform you based on a PGX analysis what drugs, we're talking pharmaceuticals now, what drugs your body best manages or deals with, what drugs are best for you if you need to take them.
That's absolutely fascinating, and I think going to change so many lives, and very, very exciting. Now, listen, we have to wrap.
Yeah.
That's it for the DNA Talks today. We've explored some fascinating topics about supplements and what could be right for you. Again, we've said this maybe 4 times now in the podcast. Talk to your doctor before you start anything new at any time.
Yeah. Look forward to the next one, Cheryl. I really appreciate your time.
Yes. Oh, wait. And I did say when we do the end of this that I would give you a code in case you wanted to go and find out what your roadmap is, where your bumps are. So don't forget, first of all, to subscribe to the podcast, use code Cheryl H for 10% off your DNA 360 test, and follow us on social media for more health tips and updates. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.